Hey everybody, it's Preacher, and today we're starting our new series called Stand Out. Big question you guys always ask me is how can I stand out in an ever-increasing skill level of players? And, believe it or not, it is, because fights are getting harder, players are having to get better. It becomes more difficult to stand out. There's lots of good resources out there, such as my channel and other websites where people are learning the generals of their class and actually increasing their ability. They're starting to think about things like trinket procs and all that, even though it's moved away from that in WoD, and looking at other ways of increasing their damage and maximising potential and all that stuff. And in that environment, it becomes really difficult to be the guy that's like, that's your raid spot secured. That's it. We want this guy and we'll keep him around and we'll give him some leeway if he needs a little break or whatever. And a lot of people fear for their raid spot. What we've seen recently, and I'm sure most guilds are going through this as more people progress towards Mythic, is people are starting to leave their guilds and some people are not getting their raid spot. They had it in Mists of Pandaria. They had it quite safe. But now that we need to cut 5 people, that chop is starting to happen because regardless of friendships or ability to say, no, you're not coming and all that kind of stuff, we have to get rid of 5 people. There's only 20 people allowed in this raid, and then you'll invite people and they're not performing and all that kind of stuff, and they're not stand out. They don't stand out in any particular way, and then therefore you become a replaceable asset. So what we're going to do over this irregular series, I'm going to try and do them pretty much every now and again. I've got about 10 lined up that will release probably weekly or something like that, is look at little things that people don't do and maybe don't realize make you stand out these days. Yeah, make you stand out in the current WoD environment. So we're going to start with a very simple one for now, a simple one that causes a lot of people to fuck up. It really does tell a story in my eyes, and I'll show you how that is. And that is interrupts. Interrupting. The ability to kick or counter spell or use spell lock. A lot of people don't even know they've got an interrupt in some fashion. Very similar to how a lot of hunters don't realize they can dispel magic and remove frenzies and all that kind of stuff. They just don't do it. They rely on someone else to do it. And therefore, whoever is doing it stands out. Yeah, it's a very simple process. If you're the kind of player who gets lazy or just knows that somebody else does it, you have to bear in mind that the guy who is doing it is the guy who's standing out in this area. When it comes to different levels of being able to interrupt, there are a variety of stages of people who are better and better and better, and vice versa, worse and worse. You'll have guys who just don't interrupt, who are generally stuck in the normal modes right now. Something we're going to be reviewing in the future, so make sure you check that out. The nightmare that is normal mode is they just don't interrupt at all. They're focused probably primarily on making sure they're doing as much damage as possible, or even trying to learn their class in some fashion, and are really just so mentally caught up in things elsewhere that including interrupts into that entire cake mix of situations is just practically impossible, and therefore that it just goes missing. The next stage is people who are able to see an interrupt and decide whether or not that spell is worth interrupting. A real clear indicator in Warlords of Draenor is the fact that things casts a variety of different spells continuously. Interrupting them doesn't really spell lock anymore. What it does is give you a huge cooldown and interrupt, which we've now gotten used to, and they will cast different spells along the way. So you've also got your second boss in Everbloom, who will go things like Nature's Wrath, Briarskin, Bambrel Patch, back to Nature's Wrath, and then you're like, oh, I've interrupted because I kicked Nature's Wrath. Oh shit, Briarskin got through, or the heal, or something like that. We even have simple ideas of this being shown in the Alcon Doom 5-man, where the casters will cast things like Rain of Fire, Immolate, and of course Incinerate, and you have to pick and choose which of those you want to actually get rid of, and you can only really do a couple. Then we move on to the guys who can do it dedicated. If it's a boss that requires dedicated interrupts, so you're talking things like Brackenspore in WoD, you had things like Malkoriak back in Cataclysm and so on and so forth, and this needs timed interrupts with macros, going to other people, and then they get really stressed out with that. Some people can cope with that very easily, some people cope with that very badly, and they're relying on add-ons and things to pronounce their name and give them some huge indication that it is their turn to do it. They find the fact that they're part of a team unable to target switch. Yeah, big issue you'll see is you'll say, hey, your third interrupt on this, and they'll interrupt, which means they've got a good probably 30-40 seconds before they interrupt again, but in that time they're so panicked and caught up in it that they won't target switch. Their DPS on other more important things will be lower. All that kind of stuff feeds into the idea of being a good interrupter, and then ultimately you have guys who don't seem to have a problem with it, and generally then you work on speed, and that would be the top level. Can you interrupt the correct spell really fast? Yeah, can you do that? Can you be that guy? And that's where you all ultimately want to be. You want to be the guy that not only can interrupt relaxed, Can target switch and come back to the target, can monitor what's going on, and also do it super fast so it's never going to be a problem. Or in fact, even better than that, is do it to a stage where it has a longer cast, which means other people's cooldowns are coming back faster, having more of a chance to come back, and you can interrupt at the last second. Then you're taking into account things like your latency and all that kind of stuff, allowing things to take a longer cast so there's more time going on, more time to breathe. All these kind of things make you a much better person. Is this relevant to a lot of things? Yes. Some people really fear being called up when they know that boss is coming. They might know that they're coming up to things like a Bracken Spoiler or a Malkoriak and interrupts are required, and they start getting panicked. And I never want any of you guys to be that person. This also counts to many of you who are looking for guilds. More and more guild masters are doing things like I used to do now, which is when you post your logs, you've recorded your own logs of some raids, or perhaps you were in a previous guild that's no longer working out for you, either via progress or you're just not fitting in, and you send off your logs and your DPS is fantastic. When I get that, when I was a guild master and I was looking at my new recruits, if I would say they would send me a log, I would browse through and say, yeah, damage is fine. Now what I'm going to do is check things out like your damage taken, which you're going to discuss, and of course interrupts, and looking at things like trash particularly. If I see that your name doesn't pop up pretty much at all on interruptible trash, that indicates to me that you're probably a lazy player. A real lazy player. When it comes to trash, you almost switch off. Maybe you switch on for bosses, but in between times, you're kind of just missing the point and not bothering to do anything. And that worries me as a guild master, is that I have a lazy player. I look at bosses that require interrupts. Are you the guy being picked? It's important that you get picked. If you want to be the guy who's being moved up and getting fast progress and spending less time wiping, which most people want out of the game, is to spend less time on their ass and more time killing things, I'm going to be looking at things like, are you the guy being picked to do this? Are you on the selection list? And if not, why not? Are you not reliable? Are you one of these people who will stress out if I put you in an interrupt rotation? All those kind of things, right? So various stages of getting through this. First and foremost, God, get yourself a nice big cast bar. It's very important when you look at people's UI. This goes out for the guild masters out there as well. Is how big is their cast bar of their enemy? You'll see some people have insane sized cast bars. Really crazy. I have a particularly large one. It's wider than my health bar, and it's right in the middle of my screen. Most people would say it's the most prominent thing on my screen, besides sort of DPS cooldowns or whatever it might be, is the enemy cast bar. That is a good indication that somebody cares about interrupts. And obviously vice versa to that, the counter would be the guy who has a cast bar which is like the Blizzard standard one, or something that's really tiny over in the distance, which means no thought pretty much has gone into that. I'm not saying that some people can't do just fine with that. They can, obviously. But if you look at it, it's a bit of a warning. There's a clear warning there. If an enemy cast bar has been given no thought whatsoever, that, yeah, maybe you're not particularly interested in interrupts, because there's going to be a whole other bunch of shit going on your screen in some occasions, and an enemy cast bar ain't one of them. So quartz is what I use. It's something like that, quartz, where you can adjust your cast bar and make it nice and obvious. And once that starts to appear more regularly on your screen, guess what will naturally happen is you're aware that things are casting. You're aware that this is going on, and you're taking notes of it because it's appearing in a fashion that kind of says, hey, I'm fucking casting. I'm casting spells here. Do you know that? Yeah? Look, it's right in the middle of your screen. You can see that. Usually it's not there. Now it's there. It's appeared. And then you start to take note of that. I always have this weird thing about PvP as well. I often take some people to PvP or go into PvP and they interrupt really well. Get them into a PvE environment and they start relying on other people. And as somebody who focuses on getting you guys into good PvE, I really recommend that you transfer that ability over, because it does raise red flags, whether you know it or not, or whether it's been brought up to you or not, or whether you go, it's fine. I can do it when asked. To me, that's a warning sign. Not for most guilds, but for good guilds, that's a warning sign. If you're only doing things when asked to do them, you're not going to be that secure raid spot, are you? You're not, because people don't want to ask you. They want people to go, I'll deal with it. It's fine. I've got this. Yeah, I know about it. It's fine. I can deal with this. I'm comfortable doing it. So what about reading? The good thing about having a large cast bar as well is you generally are able to read what spell it is in nice clear letters. A tiny cast bar means tiny text in most occasions, and therefore you can't really read it, which then moves us on to the idea of being able to pick and choose which spells we are interrupting. Okay, so that cures both of those things. What about being comfortable? I mean, being comfortable under pressure in serious situations. What tips and advice can I give you towards being that guy who is absolutely cool as a cucumber when it comes to those situations? Not everyone makes mistakes. It's going to happen. Yeah, everyone makes mistakes. But in general, what you need to do is put yourself in some tricky situations. Put yourself in some tricky situations, such as being on your own. If you're going to be in an interrupt list and there's backups and that kind of stuff, be on your own. So it's okay. If we don't have enough backups for everybody, I'll do the one on my own. Guess what you'll do? You'll focus more on it. It's perfectly fine in a situation where you're lined up to interrupt to change target before it happens, and then just be aware of what you're doing and start looking at the other things going on, informing you that your interrupt is coming, be that in the /say bubble, a whisper, or even just a boss timer, and you'll start naturally paying more attention to those things. Force yourself not to sit in a comfortable position, which is ignoring everything else and just waiting for your time to kick. And if you keep doing that, believe me, you'll struggle as time goes on. You will never be the best guy that you can be. You'll never be the best player you can be. You will just be a replaceable entity within that raid. And you don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that. Start putting yourself in a situation, force yourself to change target, and pay attention to all the notifications that exist, which tell you that it's your time to shine. It's your time to shine. And then you'll start moving on in that. What you'll naturally notice is, one, you'll interrupt way more. Over the course of a whole raid, you'll start interrupting way more. People will start noticing that their interrupts are getting beat. Believe me, when people kick something before me, I take notice. I'm like, okay, someone's faster than this. Probably a paladin with Avenger's Shield and pure luck. But in most occasions, I do take notice of things like this. I start noticing the things like, if we got an interrupt boss coming on, we're safe here. I know who I want in that team, and everything's pretty good. You want to be that guy. Because then you're not in this scenario where, who do we replace here? Well, we can replace you because, frankly, you're replaceable. You're not bringing anything to the raid on a regular basis, which really makes your spot valuable. Yeah, it makes you somebody we want in the raid. Those are things to consider with interrupts. Get your interrupt bar nice and large. Start forcing yourself to do things a little bit out of the ordinary. Start forcing yourself to use things like focus kicks, making sure you're in range, and being on your own. All these kind of things that right now probably seem uncomfortable to you. And then start forcing yourself to do them. And that's how you fix it. Similar with key binding. Force yourself to change it, and suddenly you'll find that you're miles better at it. All right, guys? Little talk about interrupts there. Take it easy and have a great day. Bye-bye.